everyone. My name is Miguel Myers. Welcome to my horror confessional, where every week I will have a guest come on and talk about one classic horror movie that they haven't seen and why. We'll discuss the movie, the actors, and probably get off topic quite a bit. Once I believe that they are properly atoned, I will absolve them of their horror movie sin. Today we have E.M. Roy. They is a writer and lover of all things weird, horrific, and dark, especially when those things have a social justice bend and are rooted in a queer perspective. Since obtaining a BA in English from Boston University, their work has appeared in a handful of small publications. She currently resides near Portland, Maine, with her parents, sibling, and dog, Boo. Let the Woods Keep Our Bodies, coming October 2023 from Ghoulish Books, is their debut novel. Ellie, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'm really excited. First of all, I'm excited to talk about this movie you chose, The Dead Zone. But then
Yeah,
I'm also excited to talk about you. So you have a book coming out from Ghoulish Books
I do.
literally next month
Next month,
called
yeah.
Let the Woods Keep Our Bodies. Could you tell myself and the listeners a bit about the book?
Yeah, so it is set in a fictional small town in Maine, which is where I'm from. It's about a girl who goes missing in this sort of weird small town New England vibes where things don't necessarily happen very much to the everyday viewer, but things as soon as you start delving deeper into sort of the town's history, there's some strange like urban legends, cryptic monstrosities type of things going on there. And for some reason, everyone in the town seems to suspect this girl's girlfriend in the being involved in the disappearance. So that's sort of the synopsis of the book.
Very nice. So it's set in Northeast or Maine, and you
Yes.
choose Dead Zone. We got Stephen King in
Hmm.
here. So in your book, is there anything about like a nor'easter, or is anybody saying "a up"?
Oh yeah. Well, in this one it's more so set in like autumn, so it doesn't really deal with like the winter vibes, but
Yeah,
we're getting there. It definitely has like that same sort of autumnal feel that's like creepy and like foggy, misty in the woods.
yeah. Are you rocking a Spirit Halloween t-shirt?
I sure am. Yeah.
That's awesome. I
I
love it.
went yesterday for the first time this
Very nice.
season. Yeah.
I was about to say ever or
No,
this
no,
season.
no. The first
Okay.
time this season. Yeah.
Yeah. I've already been bitten by the Halloween season bug, like beginning of August, and my wife was like, "You're
Mm.
crazy." But that's just the most wonderful time of the year, you know.
It is. Yeah,
And
it's just so magical.
did you buy anything, pick up anything cool at Spirit, or were
I
you just
picked up
going for
another
vibes?
shirt. Yeah,
Okay.
well, I was going for vibes first and foremost, but I picked up another shirt that was like the painting Scream, but with Michael Myers in it. So it
Yes.
was pretty
Okay.
good. And I want to get a costume for my dog, but I didn't find a good one. I was leaning towards Pennywise, but we'll see.
They they did have a Halloween dog vest, but it was just like I think the back of on the dog's back, it's just like a picture of the poster of like
Oh
Halloween
yeah.
6 or something like that. I was like, that's really random.
Right. Like
It's
you
like
could have done something more, like just a
you could
poster.
tell what licenses they have, right? Because they have the license for
Right.
like Halloween 2. You see a bunch of Halloween 2 merchandise, but
Right.
not like
Yeah.
regular Halloween. It's just weird. But yeah. And then I've been hitting up Home Goods like
Love
since
Home
the beginning of
Goods.
yeah,
Yep.
because they have so much awesome stuff.
In Target,
Uh
yeah, they
yeah,
have a ton
my
of good
my
Halloween
Target
stuff.
hasn't I'm in Austin, and my
Hmm.
Target welcome to Shop Talk. Where this is a shop talk where we're just talking about where we go shopping. But my Target is going through a renovation, so
Oh
it
yeah.
sucks. Like everything's
Oh
mislabeled, and
man.
they don't have the Halloween stuff out yet.
Oh
Obviously,
man.
I'm in Austin, so there's a bunch of other Targets, but I'm lazy, so I've just
Right.
been going to them. But I have gone to like I've driven at least 45 minutes away to like another Home Goods to find other
Hmm.
stuff because I've been to my local Home Goods
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
to find the cool stuff. I want those goddamn ghost pillows. I haven't.
Those are so cute. I love those.
Yeah, freaking TikTok got it in my head, and now I want it. But Not gonna find it. But okay, um, so you're writing. So this is your debut novel. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So is it have did you start writing short stories, or I'm not a writer, so I apologize if seems like a silly
No,
question,
that's
but
okay.
I don't know what the process is.
Yeah.
Did you start out going for a novel, or did you kind of work your way up to that?
Yeah, so I sort of started doing a lot of short stories. I have a few of them published in like small magazines. But I started writing this novel actually while I was in college. In Boston, I was studying English and I was actually studying abroad in London, when I started actually like coming up with the story for this specific book. Because I was reading a bunch of like old Gothic Victorian type of stuff for my major, and it we went on like a field trip to Mary Shelley's grave, um,
Oh,
which
nice.
was dope as hell.
Wait,
Am I
I'm
allowed to swear?
sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, fucking course. Wait,
Okay.
I'm sorry. Did you say that you went on a field trip in college? Like, was this with the
Yep.
college like
Yep.
class?
Yeah.
What the
Yep.
hell? I've never heard of a college class doing a field trip. That
Yeah, yeah,
sounds
yeah.
awesome.
While I was studying abroad in London, because all the classes I was taking were English related. So we went on a field trip to Mary Shelley's grave, which was like so cool, in this really old like cemetery in England. And we were just like sitting there hanging out doing some homework with my friends, and I just kept like thinking of like these two girls in my mind wandering through a cemetery, and like that sounds very basic, I feel like, but there was something there in my mind. So I that night started like outlining a story that eventually became Let the Woods Keep Our Bodies. But I wasn't really anticipating it to be a novel at first, because I'd never written a novel before, which is sort of weird to say. But I wasn't like I didn't really know what I was doing very much. I was like 19 and started outlining this story that eventually just like kept going and going and going. Eventually I'm like 60,000 words in and I'm like, "Oh, this is long. This is difficult," but we got there eventually. And yeah, super excited to be working with Max on publishing it because he is a lovely guy. Um, and just really excited.
And the cover's great. I love the cover.
Thank you. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
it.
You were in Boston.
Yes.
Did you? My wife and I earlier this year for our anniversary, we went to Boston for Satan Con, and
Mm,
then also we went to Salem. And I had never
yeah,
been to Salem before. Have you been? Did you
I
get a chance to go
love
to Salem?
Salem. Yep, love Salem.
It's so great. It's
It's
I
awesome.
had
Yeah.
so much fucking fun. I'm sure if you live there as a local and like you grew up there, you probably hate everybody. Um, but I had so much fun. Like,
Yeah.
just again the vibe of it and all like the history. Like I came back and I was like, I need to learn more about the Salem witch trials and all that.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's really cool. They have a bunch of cool museums. Some of them are definitely better than others. Some of them are definitely a little bit like tourist trappy, but like they have a bunch of cool bookstores and like just little oddity shops that are really cute. Highly recommend if you haven't been.
Yeah, definitely. So then let's talk a bit about your background. So,
Yeah.
growing up, were you always into horror, either literature or movies, or did you kind of come to that later in life?
Yeah, so it's sort of interesting. Like as a kid, I was very easily frightened. Like very, very easily frightened. Like E.T. was too scary for me as a kid. Um and like to this day I like can't sit through all of E.T. because it's like trauma. But like I read like Goosebumps and stuff, which I really, really loved, but I didn't get into movies in the horror genre until I was probably like 16 or 17. That's when I really started getting into like classics like It, and The Shining was probably like the first one that I really latched onto. Um, I don't know. There's something different about like reading something horror and then watching it. Because when you're watching it, like it's just happening. You're not like almost when you're reading, it feels like you're almost an active participant because you can go at your own speed. When it's a movie, it's
100%.
just
Yeah.
going. Yeah.
Well, like that's a great point because when you're watching a movie, you're watching someone else's version of
Yeah.
that. When you're reading it, you're literally making it up in your mind. Like oh, this
Right.
character looked like this, the house looks like this, that monster's coming at me. Yeah, I completely agree. So you said you were kind of I don't know, remember the word you said, so I apologize. Scaredy cat. I don't, or like
Yeah.
it, okay. Um, how about your family? Did you have family members or friends that were into horror as well?
Yeah,
Or
like my
yeah, that were
mom,
into horror, I should say.
yeah, my mom is super into horror as well. Not so much my dad, I don't think. Like he'll watch it every now and then, but my mom is super into like all the Stephen King stuff. Obviously being from Maine, that's sort of a given.
Yeah.
But yeah, that she was super into Stephen King, but I didn't really like fully get into the horror mode until I was like 16 or 17.
Hmm. Okay. And how about the friends? The reason why I ask is because I've always reason why I ask all of this,
Mhm.
because my journey with horror has always been very singular, or
Mm,
in that like I was the only one in my family who really loved horror. I was the only one in my family who like read, really. Like my two older brothers didn't read at all. They're more like sports based, which I love sports as well, but
yeah.
I liked reading more. And so like, and then my friends, same thing. Like I didn't really have a community around me that liked horror until I moved to Austin, really, and that was like in my mid 30s. And so I'm always kind of fascinated to hear what other people's journey has been. So that's why uh, I'm just kind of interested to know, like, did you have friends as well who were into it, or no?
Like not really.
Mm.
When I was in high school, like we didn't really do a whole lot of the horror stuff. Like I didn't have many friends who were super into it. Um, and which probably contributed to like why I didn't really fully get into like all of Stephen King's works, and all of like the classic horror stuff until like last year of high school, beginning of college, is when I really started paying more attention to it. But yeah, it's been sort of singular for me as well in that sense. Like I was sort of discovering all of these classics that I had never been exposed to, often while I was at college. So that there's that added sense of like isolation, being away from your hometown for the first time type of thing. So just had some spooky stories to keep me up at night, which was lovely.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, so let's kind of get into the movie that you're here to talk about. So you're here to confess your horror sin of never having watched The Dead Zone.
Yes.
Um, and I've forgotten what year that came out already. Let me see.
1983.
1983. Cool. So The Dead Zone from 1983. So why do you think this particular movie passed you by? Is it one of those where I'm sure you've heard of it because Stephen
Yeah.
King, obviously, but was it at the top of your list, or had you just been avoiding it? Why do you feel like this one you hadn't seen yet?
You know, it's weird, like, because Stephen King and David Cronenberg are two of like all-time favorite people in the horror space. So
Mm,
it's weird that I hadn't seen it, especially being from Maine. But you know, when people talk about like Stephen King or David Cronenberg, The Dead Zone doesn't really come up as a favorite that often, I feel like. Like it's just sort of something that is like solid good story, but it's not like either one's best. It's not like their magnum opus, type of thing. So you know, when I think of David Cronenberg, I think of like The Fly or Videodrome. I don't think of The Dead Zone. So I think it's like it's been on my list to watch forever, but I just never got around to it because I didn't see many people talking about it.
yeah, that's true. Like you don't hear a lot of people talking about it, but and especially with what David Cronenberg goes on to do.
Yeah.
Well, what he did before and then what he does afterwards, this is like an outlier
Right.
in his
Yeah.
work. And not so much Christopher Walken, because Christopher Walken is like all over the place. He could do
Yeah.
whatever the fuck he wants and be successful at it. But
Right.
so but I could see that. For me, I saw Dead Zone, maybe this is the third time I've seen it, and I had
Mm.
seen it maybe a decade ago, and then funny enough, like a year ago, I bought this, like, those 5 those cheap Blu-rays that have like 5 movies on them,
Yeah.
and it just happened to be a Stephen King collection with like Carrie and Cujo and The Stand and
Hmm.
something else, and then The Dead Zone. And so I was going through all these movies that I bought, and I saw The Dead Zone like 2 months ago or something before you and I talked. And
Yeah.
then when you said you wanted to do The Dead Zone, I was like, all right, cool, I'll check it out again. And I have enjoyed it more each time I've seen
Mm.
it. I don't know if that's been your experience, or I don't know. This is your first time watching it, but maybe in the future, if that'll be
Yeah.
your experience or not. But I enjoyed watching it. So The Dead Zone from 1983, as you said, directed by Cronenberg,
Yeah.
who at this point in his career had already done Shivers, Rabid. So Shivers was 75, Rabid was 77, The
Mm.
Brood was 79, Scanners was 83,
Right.
and then Videodrome came out right before this one. So Videodrome came out in 83, and then this
Hmm.
one as well. But came out earlier in the year. And Videodrome was a financial disaster. Like now
Yeah.
it's an all-time classic, and
Right.
but financially it didn't do really good. So as I was saying, it's just this particular movie, while it was shot really well, I don't
Yeah.
see any of David Cronenberg in it. I'm not
I
sure if you
know. Yeah. Me too. Like I wanted like some body horror. I wanted goop and I didn't get the goop, you know?
yeah. And then just a couple of years later, he would do The Fly.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah.
this is so we did Videodrome. Um, so for the listeners, I did Videodrome with Homies of Horror first season, and then I did The Fly just a couple weeks ago with John Baltusberger. So this is the third Cronenberg movie I've done. So I'm not going to go too much into Cronenberg's background. If you want to listen to those episodes to find out more about David Cronenberg, go right ahead. But yeah, so the directed by David Cronenberg and then written by Jeffrey Boam, Boam, I believe it's pronounced Boam. He had done, very surprised, he did Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. He did Lethal Weapons 1 through 3, and then he also did The Lost Boys, which I did earlier. That's why I was
Oh,
like, how does the name sound familiar? It's because he did The Lost Boys. So he's kind
I
of
didn't know
like,
that.
yeah. And then the cast, Christopher Walken as Johnny Smith. Stephen King wanted to cast Bill Murray as
Right.
as Johnny Smith. I don't know how that would have worked out.
I can't see it. No.
Yeah, I can't see it either. But so Christopher Walken, obviously, he's been a King of New York, Pulp Fiction, The Prophecy 1 through 3, which I don't know why. I could understand doing one, but I don't know why he did 2 or 3.
He
But
kept
I think,
going. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's how a weird character he is. He's one of those people, Christopher Walken, and then like Nicolas Cage
Mm,
and Vincent Price is like you hire them for who they are, and
right.
then
Yeah.
then he also was famous for this Saturday Night Live um, skit called Ed Glosser Trivial Psychic with Limited Usefulness. Have you seen this sketch?
I haven't. No.
Sketch.
Sketch. Yeah.
Yeah. So my friend Tim, who's been on the show before, told me about this, and it's basically he's playing Johnny Smith from this movie on Saturday Night Live.
Hmm.
When he touches people, he's in an office, and when he touches people, he gets this just connection, just like in this movie, and he could tell the future, but what he can tell is very unuseful. Like one person, he touches him and he finds that he's going to leave his cup of coffee in the cab in the morning, and
Oh
that's it.
no.
Or the other guy is going to get like a brain freeze. So I'm not explaining it very well, but it's really hilarious. So if you
Amazing.
guys haven't seen that, I recommend it. It's on YouTube. It takes you 2 seconds to look up, and it's a 4-minute skit. And then also starring Brooke Adams as Sarah Bracknell. I'm sorry, Brooke Adams as Sarah. Yeah, and then she was in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Unborn, and Days of Heaven. Tom Skerritt as Sheriff George Bannerman. He was in Alien, Contact, and Top Gun. So Martin Sheen as Greg Stilson. He was in obviously Apocalypse Now, The Departed, The West Wing, and he was also the elusive man in Mass Effect. If you ever played any of those games,
Oh, I didn't know
uh,
that.
Yeah. And then Nicholas Campbell as Deputy Frank Dodd. He was in Cinderella. I'm sorry, Cinderella Man, A Bridge Too Far. And then this weird, like, house like show from Canada called Da Vinci's Inquest, that the only reason I found out about is like it was on USA on Saturdays when I was cleaning, when I was living at
Mhm.
home, whatever. It was basically like, yeah, house meets what's that Miami one where the cop takes off his glasses? I don't know. But anyway,
Oh, yeah,
it's
I know what
called,
you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but this cast, I mean, it's a pretty pretty good cast. Christopher Walken, Brooke Adams, Tom Skerritt, Martin Sheen. Like that's those are big names.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so first I'm going to go a bit into the production of the movie, and then we'll start talking about it. So, real quick, Dino De Laurentiis. Are you familiar with the name at all?
Familiar with the name. Yes.
Yeah. So Dino De Laurentiis was a huge producer, late 70s, early 80s, up into the 90s, and he did tons of horror movies. A lot of like your favorite horror movies you're going to enjoy. I went into Dino in another episode, so I'm not going to go too far into him, but I'd recommend for people who don't know Dino De Laurentiis to look him up. But he bought the rights to The Dead Zone, and he disliked Jeffrey Boehm's screenplay and asked Stephen King to adapt his own novel.
Mm.
De Laurentiis rejected King's script and said it was too involved and convoluted. But Cronenberg recalls it as him rejecting. Like he says, Cronenberg
Mhm.
wanted to take credit for rejecting it.
Oh, yeah.
And he said it was needlessly brutal. So either way, they didn't. Neither one of them liked King's script.
Yeah.
So then De Laurentiis then commissioned another script from Andrzej Sulowski. If you yourself or the listeners aren't familiar with Andrzej Sulowski, he was the controversial Polish director who did Possession.
Oh, yeah.
If you have you seen Possession, or if you've
I
heard
have
of
seen
it?
Possession. Yeah.
Possession is a once in a
It's
lifetime movie.
crazy. Yeah.
It changes it. Like there's your life before Possession and life
I
after
know.
Possession.
Yeah. It's a
And so
wild one.
yeah, so that guy wrote a script for the Dead Zone, but ultimately it was rejected, and then they went
Huh.
back to Boam's script, and they kind of stood with that. But I'm
Interesting.
just wondering what kind of movie. I think Cronenberg with Zulowski, I think would have been a crazy
That would have
movie.
been so cool. And oh man, it's like it's almost such a shame because like Cronenberg and Stephen King, obviously like Stephen King has varying degrees of script writing ability. But like it's like so many like superpowers of horror coming together and like I wanted so much more out of it.
Yeah, I mean, you would have gotten that goop that you were asking
Yeah,
for
yeah, I
if
wanted the
if
goop.
if Zulowski had if they'd taken his script. So then later, Cronenberg kind of questioned the quality of the script that De Laurentiis was reading, because it was originally written in Polish, then it was translated to English, and then translated to Italian.
Mm.
So basically, what Cronenberg is saying is like the script could have been really good. What Zulowski wrote, because he's Polish, could have been really great, but by the time it was translated the three times back into
Uh,
Italian, De Laurentiis was like, "Oh, this is trash." So that's
yeah.
probably what happened.
Oh man.
So the film was finally on track to be made when De Laurentiis hired producer Deborah Hill to work with Cronenberg and Boam. Are you familiar with Deborah Hill?
I don't know. I don't think so.
So that's fine. I mean, she passed away a while ago, but Deborah Hill is an absolute rock star in the film world. She essentially co-wrote Halloween with John Carpenter. She
Oh,
wrote all of the dialogue for the women. So like when they're all together, that's Deborah Hill.
that's
And then
awesome.
she produced it as well, and she was his producing partner for a while. Carpenter's producer, excuse me, she was Carpenter's producer partner for a while, so she produced a lot of his early stuff. So like Halloween 1 through 3, The Fog, Escape from LA, and then later on Escape from New York. She did Adventures in Babysitting. She was just a rock star. She doesn't get the recognition that she deserves.
Mm,
But she was definitely huge in the horror scene in the 80s and 80s and 90s. She started to taper off. But
that's
if you guys
awesome.
haven't listened, or if you haven't heard Deborah Hill, I would recommend you guys listening, or I'm sorry, looking into more into her work. But yeah, she's amazing. So I'm going to give a brief synopsis of the movie, and then that way we can just go by off our notes.
Okay, cool.
So, after awakening from a 5 year coma, the result of a serious car accident on his way home from an outing with his girlfriend, high school teacher Johnny Smith finds that he has developed the ability to foretell events. When a nurse is bathing him, for example, he realizes that her house is on fire. Uh, sorry, nurse is not bathing him. The nurse just kind of is touches him, right? Oh, I guess
He
she
was
was bathing him.
sweaty. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm taking bathing as the other thing now, but so when an Earth is like wiping out the sweat from his brow, he realizes that her house is on fire, which is endangering her daughter. Then later, when his doctor and confidant, Dr. Sam Wyzak, touches him, he has flashbacks to the trauma that Wyzak suffered when separated from his mother during World War II. But he also knows that the woman lives in a nearby city. Johnny also finds himself pining for his girlfriend, Sarah Bracknell, who is now married and has a young child. With his powers misunderstood, Johnny relocates and tries to put it all behind him, working out of his home as a tutor. However, when he shakes the hand of a young and upcoming political candidate, he is confronted with evidence that the man will, as President of the United States, launch a cataclysm that may destroy all of mankind. Also, he finds a serial killer in the middle of
Yeah.
all this.
Side note.
Yeah, side exactly. So let's kind of get started. Let's go kind of, we can go note by note, beat by beat if you'd like.
Yeah.
My first note was we get like these still images and like haunting orchestral music to start as the title starts to take more and more of the screen, and it's kind of a
I love that
weird and
opening sequence.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of cool. Yeah.
It's really cool. Um, yeah, I love that it kind of plays into there's like several different meanings I found like between the book and the movie and just like interpretations of each of what the dead zone represents or like what it means. Like some people attribute it to it being like the part in Johnny's visions that where the future is changeable. Some people think it's just like pieces that like the part of his brain that is literally dead, damaged from the car accident that he was in. Like it's weird that there's so many different sort of interpretations of what the dead zone exactly refers to.
Yeah, and in this movie, they refer they Dr. Wyzak says the dead zone is the parts of his foretellings, his visions,
Visions. Yeah.
part of his visions that are blocked to him. And so
Right.
that's what in this movie, but that's not what it is in the Dead Zone. In the novel, it's what how you're explaining it. And I guess that's a good question. Have you read the Dead Zone?
I have not. No.
Okay. Wow.
Another
Coming un-
sin. Yeah.
coming unprepared
Yeah.
for I haven't read it either.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I guess I saw his haircut, and
Yeah.
it's this bowl cut. I'm like, I don't know, like I haven't seen Christopher. I haven't seen Christopher Walken in a good haircut. Like I don't
Right?
know
Yeah.
what it is about him,
He
but
makes
he is.
choices for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And then he just off top of his head like freestyles the Raven to
Right?
his
Yeah, I know.
class,
Yeah.
which is kind of cool.
I love that. Yeah. In that beginning part, with like the car accident, I thought that was kind of interesting because I watching this for the first time, I figured, oh, this must be like Stephen King must have written this after his car accident. But in researching it, I found out the book was written in 79. Stephen King's car accident was in 1999, 20 years later. So I thought that was like oddly prescient of the movie and the book. Like it I don't know. There's something about a movie that talks about changing the future and like having visions of the future that then precedes all of like these actual things that happened.
Yeah, oh, exactly. Like, I mean, he's Johnny Smith, right? He
Yeah, yeah.
he foretold his own accident. Was that when he was hit on the road, like when he was walking and
Yeah.
somebody hit him? Yeah.
Yep.
And then he went on to write like From a Buick 8 based off of that
I
experience or
think
something like
so.
that.
Yeah.
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 Another thing he is kind of like foretold in this movie, or in the novel, in the movie, is like the coming of Donald Trump as president.
I know, yeah.
Uh, uh,
I wasn't expecting this movie to get so political, but it was like it was a welcome surprise, you know. I was like, "Oh
yeah,
damn. Okay. This is cool."
yeah. I mean, to be fair, like Stephen King has his problematic parts. Like
Yes.
loves using the
Yes.
N word a lot. The magical Negro trope,
Oh yeah.
it was
Yep.
invented by him and all that sort of stuff. But I do, I do like how much he gets into it with like right wingers, like on Twitter and stuff like that.
I
Even with
know. I love it.
Elon Musk and stuff like that. Like
Love
he's
it.
in
Love it.
Elon's head. It's great. But yeah, so then we see him and Sarah. They're both teachers at the same class. And they're in the hallway and they're hugging up, and it's really cute.
Yeah.
And like you can already kind of tell something bad is going to happen because it's too cute.
Yep.
Uh,
Too
so
happy.
they're yeah, so they go to this amusement park, and he starts getting headaches on the roller coaster, and I think this might either he's been getting them or this is perhaps the first inkling of what's happening or what's to come.
Yeah.
And then so she it's raining, and she asks him, uh after the carnival or whatever, the amusement park, he takes her home and it's raining, and he asks her to come in.
Hmm.
And no, I'm sorry, she asks him to come in, sorry.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, some things are worth waiting for.
Right.
I was like, oh my guy, okay, fine, I
Yep.
respect it, gotta respect
Yeah.
it.
It's like, I mean, okay, live your life, I guess.
It's very old school.
Yeah.
um and it makes for a very like touching scene later on and all that, but like they're not even engaged. They're
No.
just dating.
Yeah,
Like,
they're just dating. Like it's kind of weird, but I thought that was
yeah,
kind of funny.
yeah. um so then they have this like really romantic kiss in the rain, and then after he leaves her, the ominous music starts. And it's like, if you didn't know already what was about to happen, like this music was telegraphing it to you.
Yeah.
And Cronenberg typically works with um, Martin Shore. I
Howard
can't
Shore, I
remember the
think.
Howard Shore. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
He typically works with Howard Shore for his scores, but the studio said no, and he worked with somebody else for this,
Right.
which it's like, again, contributing to that not really feeling like a Cronenberg movie.
For sure.
It's kind of like Spike Lee. Spike Lee is a writer director,
Yeah.
and when he writes and directs a movie, you can tell that he
Hmm.
has written and directed the fuck out of that movie. And
Right.
then sometimes he takes paycheck movies, and that's fine too. People need to get paid, and he's an artist, and perhaps he wanted a break from some of the more serious stuff he's doing. But he did like The Inside Man with Denzel Washington. The
Hmm.
Inside Man is a great movie,
Yeah.
but he didn't write that. And or even like Old Boy. Obviously, he did the remake to Old Boy, and it's like that was fine, but you
Hmm.
can't, like, the passion isn't there as it is like when you do something that you've written and directed yourself. And that's
Right.
what I'm feeling was coming with Cronenberg in this one.
I totally agree. Yeah. It doesn't it feels so mellow and like a little milk toast. Like it doesn't I wanted more. I wanted so much more.
Yeah. um and so we get this trucker, so it's late at night, this trucker falls asleep at the wheel, loses control, and jackknifes his semi. And then we
Was it
see
a
this kind of,
milk truck, by the
yeah,
way?
it's a
Which is
milk
really
truck.
weird. Yeah, like it's very strange. I was
what
like,
an
why is it a
interesting
milk truck?
what an interesting choice.
Yeah.
But like it jackknifes, and the milk is this freighter is coming over the hill. It's a very cinematic shot.
Yeah.
But then when you read Milk, you're like, so it kind of takes you
Like,
out of it a little bit.
oh,
Just, yeah,
okay.
very weird. So anyway, Johnny drives right into it, and obviously he gets taken to an intensive care unit. We see Sarah running up to try to visit him there, and then she's crying and all that sort of stuff. Um, Sometime later, we're introduced to Dr. Vizak, and he's already kind of like waiting for him to wake up.
Mhm.
And this kind of felt weird because like how long has he been standing there? Like we find out
Right, yeah.
later that he's
Just
been
been
in a
hanging
coma
out for 5 years, just waiting for him to wake up.
and his parents just happen to be in the next room.
Right, yeah. Like, how did they know that he was gonna wake up? That was a little weird.
Yeah. But so uh Johnny notices that there's no bandages and he asks why, which is kind of an astute observation to have like immediately after coming out of a 5 year coma, but that was kind of cool.
Right.
The doctor brings in his parents and his mom says it's a miracle. He says, yeah, of course, look, no scratches. And she says something like God delivered you or something like that. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, I think she's gonna be a problem because she just keeps
Yeah.
saying like Jesus stuff.
I
And I
know.
thought
Yeah,
we're
like all the God stuff.
yeah, and I thought we were gonna have like Margaret White thing from like
Mm,
Carrie's mom,
yeah.
Margaret. I
Yeah.
thought that we were gonna go that way, but no, very quickly after this, the mom the mom dies. So I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. All
Um,
right.
but she does a really cute thing is like he holds out his hand to her. Johnny holds out his hand to his mom to show her that there's no bruises or whatever. And she goes and kisses and like caresses her face with
Mhm.
his hand. I was like, that was really touching. That was like a
Yeah.
really touching moment between mother and son.
It was really cute. Yeah. But like at the same time, like, why didn't he get a vision of his mom's future or something like that? Like, like
Exactly. He touches
oh
it
man.
twice. He touches her twice that we see.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm sure he touches her more than that. But that we see touches her twice and no vision. So it's like the
Right.
visions are really sporadic or convenient to the plot, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Very. Like I wanted it to be a thing where like almost like he had to wear gloves or something so that every time he touched someone like he didn't get a vision that he didn't want or something like that. Like I would have loved something
Like
more with that.
a rogue character from the X-Men, if you're
Yeah,
familiar.
yeah. Yeah, love X-Men.
Okay, so he asks about Sarah, and the mom says she's turned her back on you. She cleaves to another man, a husband. And I'm like, lady, like chill out a little
Yeah.
bit.
That was
You're
kind
a
of
bit
weird
dramatic.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, she's
Like she's not gonna put her life on pause for 5 years. She didn't know if Johnny was ever gonna wake up again. Like she's not gonna just wait forever.
yeah, I get that. You would have been like surprised the mom wasn't like didn't put her hand to her forehead. I was
I
like, oh
know,
my
so
gosh, she's left you.
melodramatic. Yeah.
Melodramatic. And I guess that was my question for you. If you were in a situation and a loved one were to be in a coma, but you're
Hmm.
just boyfriend or I'm sorry, significant others,
Hmm.
um, what what would you do in that situation?
Oh man,
I,
good question.
I don't
I
know.
I don't know. Like obviously you'd wait for as long as you can, I think, but also, you can't put your life on pause for an indefinite amount of time and just like stop living because this other person is no longer in your life type of thing. Um, I don't know. It's a tough situation.
I'm gonna need an answer. 2, 3 years tops.
Yeah. Give it a week and then I'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the same thing. Like, I don't blame Sarah for doing like for moving on,
Yeah,
but you can't help but feel so bad for
yeah,
Johnny because
for
as
sure.
he says it later when she comes to visit him, like at one point she's like, please don't look at me like that, or please stop looking at me like that. And he's
Yeah.
like, I'm sorry, but for you it's been 5 years. For me, it's like the next
Last
day.
night. Yeah.
Yeah, and
It's
that's terrible.
crazy. Yeah.
So I don't know in that situation what I would do. I know I would be racked with guilt.
Yes.
It's like the next partner you're with, or you can be like, hey, listen, me and you we're cool right now, but if this person ever
I
wakes up, like,
know, yeah. And that's the thing too. Like, she's married and has a kid now. And like as soon as Johnny wakes up, she's like, having sex with him on the living room floor. Like it's not I don't know, that's not super fair to anyone involved, I feel like. But obviously I don't blame her. A lot of emotions are involved, but
especially with your child, your 10
I
month
know,
old
like
child
just yeah,
in the other
sitting in the
room on
corner.
the
Yeah.
bed, it's just
Yeah.
sleep. It was like, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was wild. I was not expecting that from her.
Yeah.
Well, from this movie, I should say. Um, all right, so he touches the nurse's arm. She finds out that her daughter is in his fire and that she needs to go. He says,
It's not
basically
too
the room's
late
on fire.
or
Yeah, it's
something.
not too late, right? So
Mhm.
the nurse leaves and makes it back to the house as the fireman is getting her daughter out of the house.
Yeah.
Um, but she doesn't actually do anything. Like
No.
if he hadn't told her and she didn't go, the daughter would still be okay.
I know that I thought about that as well. Like they were actively taking her out of the house by the time she arrived there. So like obviously someone else on the scene had seen the house on fire and called 911. Like Johnny's mission didn't really make a difference in that case.
And I think I don't know if they were trying to hold it off for later in the movie, like a big reveal,
Yeah,
because they say the dead zone means that you can see the future and also change it.
right.
And so maybe they were trying to save that reveal for later in the movie as opposed to
That's true.
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah. So then he finds out that he needs extensive physical therapy, but he will walk again. Then he grabs the doctor's hand to say thank you, and once again has another vision.
Yeah.
It's World War II, and he said like the wolf is loose. And
Mm,
then a woman puts her son on this wagon. There's no room for her to go, so the boy is safe. And then we find out that he says the doctor is the boy,
yeah.
and his mother is alive, and he knows her name and where she lives. And then like Johnny basically asks the doctor what's happening to him.
Hmm.
The next scene, the doctor makes a call to a woman named Joanna, find out that's his mom. She's still alive, and she picks up the phone, and like the demeanors make it seem like it's all true. So he knows that Johnny now has this. Is it The Shining? I guess like
I
I don't know.
guess it
Stephen
is.
King is
I don't know. Like everything's The Shining. I don't know. I guess it is, in some sense. But another thing that I thought was sort of interesting, this is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, like the first story that is set in Castle Rock, which is pretty cool, but it's interesting that I don't know that yeah, it is like The Shining, but like
yeah.
not really.
And there's other parts of this movie that make you think that if there might be connected. So, for example, that little girl, she's by herself in the house, and the fire happens. So, could it be some sort of fire starter
Yeah,
scenario,
yeah,
sort of thing?
it's cool.
Yeah. But this is the beginning of like his. Does he have a name for it? Like the King verse, I guess.
I
I'm not
have no
sure if he.
idea.
Yeah.
Just like the Castle Rock universe, I have no idea.
Yeah, the dairy verse or something. But
Yeah,
so then we do see that there's a physical therapist who's kind of like trying to get him, helping him to walk to rehabilitate, but he's kind of an asshole. Like he's like as telling him like, "Come on,
yeah.
let's go,"
And
and
it's
then
like,
he's basically,
keep going. And meanwhile, this guy's on crutches. Like he can't
yeah.
jog around the house. Like what does he expect him to do?
Well, then he like, so he just is jogging in front of him, and like, also he's like, "All right, you're taking too long. I'm gonna go do a lap." And so he
I
goes and
know.
does a lap. So I guess I don't know. Maybe you need a bit of he's helping with motivation, but also like
Yeah.
that's why I don't get oh yeah, this is the only reason why I don't have a trainer and why I don't go to the gym. It's the
Yeah.
only reason. Not because I'm a lazy piece of shit, but because
Yeah.
the trainers are mean.
Right? Yeah. It's like it's weird. That was kind of a weird part of it for me. Like you're here to help out Johnny like rehabilitate, regain his ability to walk to as best as he can, but you're like, "Oh, I'm gonna take a lap. You stay here."
Yeah. So then we're reintroduced to Sarah. She comes to visit him, and he's happy to see her. Um, this is when we find out that you know he already knew, but she tells him that she's married
Yeah.
with a 10-month old,
Hmm.
And this is where the scene where she asks, don't look at me like that. And then I think she just what happens here? I think that the scene just ends after.
Yeah, like she just leaves and like basically says that they can't be together, but like why did you hook up with him if you were just coming by to say, "Oh, I missed you. It's been 5 years. You were in a coma. Bye."
Yeah. And then she comes back later, as we've talked about. Um
Yeah.
but so then he oh, she says that people that he is famous in town, like the media is all talking about him.
Hmm.
And then so he kind of wants to squash that, and so he gets the press together,
Hmm.
and he decides to have a conference to kind of stop all this intrigue sort of stuff. And then we get like this reporter. You could tell he's going to be a dick
Yep.
because he's leaning back in his seat. He's wearing a black leather jacket, and you're like, okay,
Yep.
like he's too cool for school.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he asks for a demonstration
Right.
of Johnny's powers, and he asks like, who's going to win the election. And he keeps insisting, and then finally he goes up there, and Johnny asks, what do you want to know? And he's like, I don't know. And then he touches his hand, and he finds, do you remember what he finds out here?
That the reporter's sister kills herself, or did kill herself, I should say. That was interesting as well. Like this is the point where I wanted to have a Scanners moment. I wanted his head to explode. Like I just, oh man, like I could see it happening. I was like, come on, come on, come on, but then it didn't happen.
Yeah. That he would have gone to jail, that he would have been,
Yeah.
then it would have been the Green Mile and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
So, so then the mom is what? So the reporter gets angry, and like a tussle breaks out, and the mom is watching with the husband at home. She kind of has a heart attack. Johnny goes to the hospital, kind of says his goodbyes, and we find out she passes away.
Yeah.
Um, but this is where I said he touches his mom's hand here as well, and no
Yeah.
premonitions, like
Like
you said.
yeah, I wanted a premonition here that like I don't know, almost like led into some afterlife type of talks. Like, I don't know, I wanted to see like, or like, sometimes there's a trope in some movies like this where they, someone will like hold on to someone's hand as they're dying and like feel the emotions that they're going through. I wanted something like that. That could have been like a really meaningful, like another sweet moment between mother and son, I feel like.
So then, but that would have been, I think that would have been a really nice, touching moment between the son and the mom.
Yeah.
Oh, what I was going to say was that this is kind of like the ending of one of the segments. This movie is almost like an anthology in itself. It's
Mm,
broken up. It's a triptych, basically. The writer kind of wanted to make it a triptych. The first thing is we're introduced to Johnny Smith and his family, his life, and what happens. Then the middle one is this thing with the serial killer, with the Castle Rock killer, and the
yeah.
last one is with the assassination attempt. So
Right.
we're out of the first kind of segment of it. Now we're into this next one. We meet Sheriff Bannerman,
Yep.
um, and he is trying to find the Castle Rock. Sorry, yeah, he's from Castle Rock, and he's trying to find the Castle Rock killer,
Right.
and he's hoping to have Johnny help him with his psychic powers.
Yeah. I would have loved to have like more of this be a central part of the overarching plot, I feel like. Like obviously, sort of like psychics helping the police force, that's been done a million times, but I feel like there could have been so much more, and I wanted the Castle Rock killer to play a bigger part and not just like kill himself in the bathtub halfway through the movie, or
Yeah.
not even halfway. But I don't know. I wanted more.
Title of the show, I wanted more.
Yeah.
For me, the whole triptych thing, I can't remember another movie that's done it like this, where they're,
Mm,
instead of having stories interwoven, you have these little segments. And obviously, like I've seen anthologies, right? But this
Yeah,
isn't that.
right.
So it's kind of weird. I'm not sure if it's successful. How do you feel about how they broke it out into like these three segments?
Yeah, I liked it. I liked the sort of three separate eras almost in Johnny Smith's story. But yeah, like I said, I wanted them to go further, like pick a direction and kind of stick with it, follow it all the way through, rather than trying to show these three different sort of almost like mini stories. Like I'm not saying that this was gonna be like the solution, but it could have been like an actual trilogy if they wanted to do each like three different stories. Um, I don't think that would have been very good, but uh,
I'm
like
intrigued.
it,
I would
yeah,
have watched it.
like if they wanted to do three separate things, then they could have like followed each of those separate ideas all the way through rather than doing each three of them a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. And I think the reason why I wasn't the biggest fan of it was because, like you said, I did want more of the middle story.
Yeah.
I wanted more of the Castle Rock killer. That was really interesting.
Yeah, like the
Um,
first like body that Johnny Smith helps them like read or whatever, like he just finds the killer immediately, that the deputy. Um it's like there was no real like tension or investigation there.
right.
I would have loved to see more of that.
And the reason why there was no tension and no investigation was because they didn't have time.
Yeah.
I mean, this movie already clocked in at like an hour 48 or something like that, you know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but anyway, so Sheriff Bannerman reaches out to Johnny and is like asking him. Basically, the nine women have died already. Nine
Mhm.
girls, they're young women, have already died already, and like asking for his help. And like God gave you this ability, this gift, and he gets very angry at that. Johnny's getting, oh, God gave me a gift. He threw an 18 wheeler at me, my guy.
Yeah. And I was like, you're right. Yeah, that kind of
Yeah.
sucks.
It's like God's been a real sport to me. And then
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Bannerman leaves because he's like, okay, yeah, I probably I stepped in it, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And then but knowing, because this was the second time I'd watched it maybe in a month and a half,
Mhm.
now I remembered the deputy was the killer.
Right.
Spoiler alert if you're watching, if you're hearing
Yeah.
and haven't seen the movie. But so knowing that the deputy dad was the killer, you see his face every time he's interacting with Sheriff Bannerman,
Mhm.
like when he's first talking about bringing Johnny in, or after he goes to talk to Johnny and nothing comes of it the first time. You're like, you can see his face. He's like, haha, I'm good. And
Right.
then
Yeah.
that third time when they're around the gazebo, um, you see his face and it's worried, and you're like, oh,
Right.
okay, that's
Yeah.
cool. Like now, knowing what I know now, it's I like that they were true to that character.
Yeah, yeah. That is cool. Um, and the part where, they go into Deputy Dodd's house to catch him eventually, like I feel like the suicide scene was kind of weird. Like I didn't I expected there to be some sort of significance to like the scissors or whatever in the bathtub that he was using, because like it's very beautifully shot. Like the cinematography of that part where it focuses on the scissors and then like kind of zooms out and you see his face and something is about to happen. Um like I thought there would be more significance to it, and that was really also the only part of like sort of body horror that we got in the movie, which was surprising for David Cronenberg, who like obviously Videodrome is one of my favorite movies of all time. And yeah.
Yeah, and we don't even really see anything.
Yeah, I
Like
know.
we see the
Yeah.
before and the after, which is a bit disappointing, but that's because I'm sick in the head and I wanted to see it.
Yeah, me
But it's
too.
also like for a literal cop who has a gun.
He left it in the kitchen or whatever, and then like the
Yeah,
mom just picked it up. Like, what the hell?
but like he chooses the scissors to
Yeah,
go out
I know.
as
Yeah.
opposed to the gun.
That was
And
weird.
also, like, I don't know how, I've never thought about it, but how
No,
deep?
I was thinking that too, because like in the after shot where you see him like twitching in the bathtub, like it didn't go in very far into his mouth or like his nose or whatever he was aiming for.
Yeah,
Like it, I feel like that wouldn't kill you. It would
exactly.
leave a nasty scar for sure, but like it didn't reach his brain.
Right. And how I wish they would have gone with that a bit further. How messed up would it have been if he didn't kill himself? He just hurt himself a lot and then he still
Mm,
had ended up having to go to prison or whatever. I think that would have
yeah, that
been
would
great
have been
because
cool.
the reason why, I mean, he fucked up because he opens the scissors, which causes a natural barrier. If he had left the
Right.
scissors closed, I think we could have
He just gonna
gone
like
all the
shoved it up
way.
his nose or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, we didn't get the gore we wanted in this movie, so we're
Yeah.
just going to talk about it instead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so backing up a little bit, we do this is where Sarah comes to visit him with her child Denny, and
Yeah.
this is when we kind of see. I think of it as I think of it as iconic, where we see Johnny Smith in this long black overcoat with the
Mm,
collar popped up,
I love that
and it
look.
looks so fucking cool.
Yeah, it's
Um,
so
it-
iconic.
yeah, and then he's got his a cane as well.
Hmm.
Um, and so Sarah comes in, and they put the baby down, and then like you were saying, like she says something to him. She's like, "Haven't we waited long enough?" Which is
Right.
obviously the mirror to this when he said, it's good to
Yeah.
wait or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I was like, "Oh, really?" And
Yeah.
then he kisses her, and then the scene kind of fades. And then all of a
Right.
sudden, she's making him dinner. Like she lives here now. Like
That was
that's
weird. Yeah, and like Johnny's dad brought out like Johnny's old high chair from when he was a baby and like put the baby in it. Like you're like masquerading as if this is Johnny's family, as if it's Johnny's kid. But I was just like, that's not your kid. Like you're not together. It was weird.
scandalous, scandalous.
Yeah.
There was a bit of a funny moment here. Like the dad, basically, Johnny was saying that the dad goes to visit this widower,
Mm.
and he makes her bookcases or whatever. And
Yeah.
then the dad asks what they've been up to, Sarah
Making
and
bookcases.
Johnny, and he says making
That was
bookcases. Like,
really
oh,
weird.
yeah,
And Sarah's just kind of like, oh, okay.
yeah.
Like that's sort of weird to make a joke to your dad.
And also, like, you're just basically admitting to your dad that she's an adulterer, an
Right, right.
adulteress, or whatever,
Yeah, like in front of the baby.
Yeah. So
Cool,
then,
dude.
so after she makes her dinner, that makes them dinner, which is really weird.
Mhm.
Um, he goes to say goodbye to her, and then he asks, "Will I see you again?" And she says, "Not like this." So that's what
Right.
you were saying. It's like, so she just wanted the one time sort of thing.
Yeah, just wanted to pretend for one day that they were all a family. And his dad even says like it's nice to have a family sitting at the dinner table or whatever. But yeah, like it feels like, she's leading him on a little bit. It's not super fair to Johnny. It's not fair to her husband. It's not fair to her. Like it because she's like tearing herself in half with between these two men that she loves, but it's it's sort of weird. It's a weird situation.
Yeah. All right. So next, we see that they're watching the news,
Mm.
and we see Sheriff Bannerman on the news again, and he says, he needs help. Basically, perhaps some citizen watching right now might be helpful.
Yeah.
Wink, wink.
Yeah,
Uh,
like a
and,
subtweet basically.
and then we find out that Johnny decides to help, and then this is where we see, like you were talking about, that great shot in the tunnel, um, looking for something that the killer might have worn or used.
Right.
And then they hand him this cigarette pack out of the evidence container, but with his hands, like
Like bare
no gloves
hands.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Like
Johnny takes it.
it's weird. Like you went to the trouble of putting this like crushed up cigarette box in an evidence bag to like make sure it's not contaminated or whatever, and then you're just handing it out to everybody and like getting their fingerprints all over it. That's weird.
Yeah, like Johnny's literally like crushing the bag. It's like, what?
Yeah.
This just
Like
happened. The
that's
chain of
evidence, man.
evidence. So then they do find out that there's been another body while they're there. They find out that there's been another body. They go to that body. It's at the gazebo.
Yeah.
He takes her gloves off, and again secure the crime scene, like chain of evidence. Like
Right.
there could be, but anyway, he takes her gloves off, and he does finally get a premonition this time, and he says that she knew her killer,
Mhm.
and then he starts to get flashbacks of the killer standing in the gazebo. Um, do you remember what happens here?
Yeah, so basically in the scene, Johnny is like a passive observer of the scene going down. So I forget the girl's name, but she and we come to find out Deputy Dodd know each other. And he sort of invites her up to the gazebo and he's like, come check out this thing. I have something here, which was really creepy. Um, and so she goes up because she knows him and trusts him, and then he ends up raping and murdering her, which is pretty fucked up. But yeah, it's weird. I feel like it didn't really build up very much. Like, like we've said before, I would have loved to have this like Castle Rock killer sequence last longer and sort of be developed a little bit more complexly. Like it felt very quick. Like they
Hmm.
Johnny arrived on the scene and like immediately figured out who the killer was, and there was no exploration of like motive or no investigation really.
Yeah. Yeah, he just says that he saw the face and it was Dodd.
Yeah.
When he touches that girl's hands, it gave me a bit of vibe of like Stir of Echoes.
Mm,
If you've seen, have you seen Stir of Echoes with Kevin
I have
Bacon?
not. Mm-mm.
Disregard.
Another one. Yeah.
I won't spoil it for you.
Okay.
I was about to go into a huge spoiler, so never mind. But I would suggest that that's a good
I'll
movie.
add it to the list.
All right, so she sees the face. He sees his face. It's Dodd, and sheriff asks where Dodd went, and another deputy there says that he took off in the sheriff's car. So like,
Mhm.
okay, something's happening, obviously. Then I noticed. So you said from Maine, right?
Yes.
All right, I'm originally from Chicago. I was there up until like 5 years ago, so I was born in there.
Mhm.
The snow was giving me PTSD.
Yeah.
Like all that snow, like every time I'm like, oh God, I can't even look at it anymore. That's literally why we
Right.
left. My wife and I, we
Yeah.
left Chicago for the snow.
Yeah. Yeah. I love snow, but yeah, it's a nightmare to drive in, and then like putting on snow tires is such a hassle. It's so annoying.
Well, they actually had the Foley artist or the sound design for this person did a great job when it came to like
I noticed
walking on the
that.
snow.
I noticed that. It had like the crunchy feeling. I was
Yeah.
like, that's exactly what it sounds like. I noticed that as well when I was watching this. I was like, ooh, that's a nice crunchy sound.
And that's what triggered it. I was like, oh God, I'm back
Yeah.
there. I'm back there. Because we would have to, we had a one car driveway, not even a garage. We had a one car driveway, and I'd have to dig myself out in the morning and then
Yep.
dig myself back
Yep. It's the
when after
worst.
work. Yeah, it
And
sucks.
then you're all sweaty and like tired and you don't want to work or do anything.
Well, also like the amount of like men or even women, but like older people who keel over heart attacks after a
Yeah,
snowstorm because they're shoveling.
because they're
I'm like,
shoveling themselves out. It's crazy.
yeah. I'm like, I'm already like overweight. I need to not put myself in that situation. So I
Right.
extracted myself. But anyway, yeah, so PTSD with the snow. But so then we see the sheriff and Johnny go to Dodd's house. Sheriff tells Johnny to stay there, but of course he follows him,
Yep.
and he kind of pushes his way into the house, even though um, Mother Dodd doesn't
Yep.
want him to come in. So I think there could be some serious ramifications for the sheriff
Hmm.
for going into this house without any warrant, and then the mom ends up
Right. Just
shooting
like barging
or
in.
getting
Yeah.
shot. So this, I think he might be losing his pension or something.
Yeah.
But regardless, he pushes away into the house, and then Johnny touches Mother Dodd and
Hmm.
says and
You
realizes
knew.
that she knew.
Right.
What
And
did
was
you
like
think when you?
protecting, yeah, it was like protecting her son, who is the Castle Rock killer. Yeah, that was a little, that was funny. Because obviously, that's sort of a trope that we've seen a few times in various stories, that the mother of like a killer will protect him. But yeah, and then she just like grabs her son's gun from the kitchen and just ends up shooting both Johnny, or did she shoot the sheriff? I forget.
She
Um,
didn't shoot she shot at the sheriff.
Shot at the sheriff and then the bullet went through Johnny. That's right. Um, but yeah, that was funny. And then also the part where she dies, it's this beautiful shot where she like collapses on the banister near the stairs and her hand kind of tumbles over and there's blood like dripping through her fingers or whatever. But when she's shot, like her hand doesn't get blood on it. Like we don't see like her grasping her wound or whatever, and we don't see like the blood dripping down it. It's just like she's standing and there's no blood on her hands, and then she falls and there's suddenly blood on her hands as it's dangling over the edge. And it's like,
Yeah,
oh.
yeah. And then it was kind of her hand was kind of like pointing at
Yeah.
Johnny's
It,
head.
yeah, it was like that was cool too. That it was sort of like gesturing towards him, almost like uh it's a meme now, but that painting of like God and Adam where they're like reaching for each other, it reminded me of
Yeah.
that almost
Ah,
in a
yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah. That's cool.
Like she's like reaching for Johnny almost as if if Johnny could touch her hand again and have another vision, maybe this could have been prevented. um
Mm,
it was interesting.
yeah. And what's funny is like it was is the lighting in the house was kind of cool, especially in the hallway. It looked great, but it was green, which
It was green, yeah.
made no sense. Or because it's around Christmas time, maybe they had one green they had green lights for Christmas. I don't know, but it looked great, but it didn't really make a lot of sense.
Right, yeah, that was funny.
Um, so, and also to back up just a bit, Dodd is like locks himself in his room.
Mm.
It's funny to see like this deputy who still lives with his mother
Right,
and
yeah.
still in his childhood room, still with the like cowboys and Native American wallpaper
Yeah,
on on the wall and like his toys around. It's like it was really
it was
it's
really weird. It's the whole like I know I've said this a million times, but I wanted more out of the Castle Rock killer sequence. Like I wanted to know, why does this deputy still live with his mom, like in his childhood bedroom that he hasn't updated? I mean, I live with my parents because I'm 24 and can't afford
yeah,
rent, but he's a deputy and he's like what, probably 30, 40.
yeah.
um it was
There's a
weird.
difference. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a difference between living with your parents and then like having the uh toys that you played with when you were 8,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
and like and the same wallpaper. Listen, even if you do it, I'm not judging that. It was just weird.
It
But
was weird, yeah.
the other part that I saw was that he got naked and then
Mhm.
put on a leather trench coat. That
Yeah,
was really
that
weird.
was
And
weird.
so
But then it cut to him sitting in the bathtub and he wasn't wearing that anymore. He was wearing like a jumpsuit, wasn't he? Um,
I
like
didn't notice. I thought it was still the leather trench coat.
maybe I'm misremembering, but
Yeah.
I thought when I was watching it, it didn't look like the same jacket at
Okay.
all.
It could be anachronistic or a whatever they call it when an error in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then he ends up killing himself. The sheriff kicks down the door and he's still twitching, like you said.
Hmm.
And then the mom attacks them and she gets it too. Johnny gets shot, and then that's the end of that sequence.
Yeah.
That part of the triptych. And then so the last one, we have to infer what's happening here.
Mhm.
Johnny opens the door, or Dr. Weezak arrives at Johnny's house. Johnny opens the door and doesn't seem very happy to see him. And we realize that Johnny moved away and didn't really tell anybody.
Hmm.
Um, and the bullet went right through him.
Right.
We find out that his headaches are getting worse, and the doctor wants him to come back with him to the institute to help him get better. But Johnny says no more medicine, and he's not getting any better.
Yeah.
And then he shows the doctor this closet full of letters that
Mm.
he's been getting in the mail asking him for help. And that seemed overwhelming.
Yeah, yeah. I liked that touch a lot actually. Because I feel like that's almost what would happen if this were to happen in real life. Like people would be reaching out to this person from everywhere to be like, please help me find this person or find this thing or like tell me what's going to happen in my future, it would be very overwhelming.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention that this movie, so The Dead Zone was written obviously by Stephen King, and he did it based off of he based the character Johnny Smith off of a real life psychic.
Right.
And I don't believe in that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But so psychic in the not the literal sense, but what the person claimed
Yeah.
to be. And this person said that they had gotten their abilities after falling off of a ladder or something like that.
Right.
And he became quite famous in the United States and got famous like in the 50s and was still famous when like Stephen King was writing this. He got like a documentary made about himself in Japan and like was
Oh.
on the Tonight shows and like
Mhm.
was like a well-known uh quote unquote psychic, right?
Yeah.
And but all of his things have been debunked. He's basically like, oh man, what's that shows like on sci-fi in like the mid 2000s or something like that, where like this guy would take the whole be questioning the whole audience and would like find a dead person that's like around. Have you do you know what I'm talking about at all or
Oh,
no?
wait, yeah, oh man, I forget his name, but I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like he's speaking to an auditorium of people and like he can see, oh, your grandmother's following you. Like
Yeah, but essentially like, oh, information he never would have been able to find out, right?
yeah,
But really, it's just so general. So he'll
right.
pick somebody and be like, "Oh, somebody close to you has had a surgery," and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh no, not really." And they're like, "No, think about it. They've had a surgery," and they're like, "Oh, I guess when they were 5, they broke their arm and had a surgery." He's like, "Yes, them." And it's like, okay, well,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
and he would get really combative with them and make it seem like it was their fault that they weren't realizing what he was finding
I
of
know. Yeah,
them.
like gaslighting all these people.
Yeah, exactly. So I just found it funny that because all his stuff had been debunked and all that sort of stuff, but I just find
Yeah.
it funny that that was the character that Johnny Smith was based on. So
Right. Yeah. It's funny.
bit of a non sequitur on my part. Sorry about that. But
All
so
good.
now we find out that he's doing private tutoring.
Mhm.
And then we do meet Roger Stewart, who shows up in like this 40s style limousine, and he says that his son needs help in school. And Johnny's like, nah, you got to bring him here. And Roger's like, no, you need to come to the house. And he's like, okay.
Mhm.
And I'm like, it didn't take much convincing,
I know,
Johnny.
yeah.
Like, kind of like
Like
rolled
for
over very
someone that
quickly.
like was implied to be like agoraphobic, like couldn't leave the house basically, it didn't take very much to convince him like, "Oh no, you really got to tutor my son. You got to come to my house." And he was like, "Okay, I'll go."
You talked me into it, you son of a bitch.
Yeah.
So then the next day, Johnny goes to what's his name? He goes to Roger's house
Yeah.
to meet the son, and that's when we meet Greg Stilson, played by Martin Sheen. He's a snake oil salesman. He's charming. He's
Mhm.
funny. He's shaking hands. He what does he do? What does he do to he takes a pin and just like puts it on.
Yeah, when Johnny's about to shake his hand to say hello, Greg Stilson just like places a button in his hand so that he can't like get a reading on him because I assume he's known about him in the paper or whatever. So he's like, if this is real, I can't risk you like telling my future.
Oh, so you're thinking so I was thinking he was just handing him out, but you're thinking he did it on
I
purpose
think
so
he
as
did
to
it
not
on
to be read.
purpose. Yeah,
I
I
wouldn't put
think
it past him. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like maybe he didn't fully believe in it, in like Johnny's psychic powers or telling the future, but he was like, just in case, I'm not gonna shake your hand. I'm gonna instead place a button in your hand so that I don't have to shake it.
I like that. I like that. So essentially we find out that Greg Stilson is there for the guy for Roger's money. He's
Mhm.
like, I need your vote and I need you, but more than anything else, I
I
need
need
your
your money
money.
more. Yeah.
Yeah. So then Johnny meets the kid and they kind of hit it off splendidly right away. They're walking on the grounds and stuff like that. So next on the TV, we see Stilson is at a rally
Mm.
or he's on the news. he's unamused, and he's kind of like roasting the whole crowd in front of him. Like he's just
Yeah.
making fun of him. He's like, look at you guys, look at the guy next to you. Are you proud to be standing next to him? You're all
Right.
unemployed. It's like, God damn, dude.
Yeah. And he was like, it's in the middle of the workday. Why are you here? Like, I was like, oh man. I was like, wow, this is very like Donald Trump. Like
100%.
just roasting everybody and like speaking incomprehensibly and just being an idiot.
And then he goes on and he says like, after the unemployed thing, he's like, I have a job for all of you. I want you to be a
Yeah.
part of my volunteer army. It's like, oh, bitch. So is it a job
Yeah,
or is it
yeah.
volunteer? Are you paying me or are you
Volunteer
not?
specifically had to get that word in there. Like, you're not getting paid, but I need you to promote me.
Yeah. And it's like, I think they picked the perfect person for this
100%. Yeah.
because Martin Sheen, he even says later on in the movie, he says that the character, Greg Stilson, has a vision that he's going to be president someday.
Mhm.
And then the actor Martin Sheen went out to actually play the president twice. He played JFK in the movie JFK, or I think it's called Kennedy. And then he
Mhm.
also played the president in The West Wing,
Right.
which is a TV show on NBC, which I didn't watch when it was first run, but my wife, I watched it with my wife and I became addicted. It's a
Yeah.
good show. Yeah.
Yeah, he has a very like presidential look to him. I feel like he's got the hair, he's got like that sort of like, I mean, maybe it's just because he's a white man, but
Yeah, I agree 100%. So then later we see Stilson and is in these offices at night and it's dark. And then the this news reporter or the editor for a local newspaper walks in and he says, hey, what are you? He basically says, you and your paid gorilla, get the fuck out of here. Which paid gorilla was so fucking funny to me.
I
And it's
love that.
so reminiscent of like 30s and 40s gangster films. Like,
Right. Yeah. That
yeah,
was a funny line. I love
yeah, I
that.
love that. But he's threatening him. This is where he said he's had a vision of himself being president of the United States, and he's not going to be not going to lose it because of this asshole, basically.
Yeah.
Um, and then they basically blackmail him. They have some compromise on him, basically
Mhm.
pictures of him with a woman who's not
Yeah.
his wife. And
Yeah.
this guy, his paid gorilla, Sonny, is such a piece of shit. Like he does a great job here as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, I loved that sort of dynamic between them. It was very fun.
Yeah, basically pretending you're being nice while you're like basically threatening this man's life.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then as they're walking out, Sonny is just like, "Oh man, he's a great guy. Like him a lot."
Yeah, but we find out that the girl, so Stilson says, I have a lot of friends, and the
Mm.
woman in that picture happens to be one of my friends as well. So they basically set him up. So
Yeah,
you start to think if this is a small town paper, right? Like
right.
I'm sure he's done this with other
Oh yeah,
reporters or other editors in other towns, and that's how he's gonna like
for sure.
rise
No,
to power,
this
you
is
know?
an experienced politician for sure.
Yeah. I mean, especially like you said, if he had the wherewithal to put that pin in his hand to not let it get touched.
Yeah,
So he's thinking 10 steps ahead of everybody, including
right.
blackmailing people who he doesn't need to blackmail them yet, but he may in the future. It's
Yeah,
fucked.
yeah.
It's fucked.
It's crazy.
So then we're back. He's tutoring the kid and he's having him read The Raven again, which he loves. And what's funny, earlier in the movie, he told his students to read The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Mm.
And if he actually later on he appears in Tim Burton's The
Yeah,
Legend
I
of
read
Sleepy
that.
Hollow,
Yeah, that's really
he
cool.
as the horse had the headless horseman. So I thought that was really
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I read that as well when I was doing some research for this. That was like really cool.
yeah. So then the doorbell rings and it's Sarah. Well, it's actually this man who's uh, talking about Stilson. I forget what they're called, like going door to door trying to
Yeah.
campaign for him, right? And
Right.
then we find out that that's Walt, who's Sarah's husband,
Mhm.
but she doesn't even introduce him at first. It's very
I
uncomfortable.
know. Yeah, like
She's
I
like
can't even think
smiling.
of the husband's name. Like I
Yeah.
don't even, yeah, that was very weird. And there's very obviously like a palpable tension between Johnny and Sarah in that scene. And like the husband is just sort of looking between them like, "Oh, I don't know if I like this."
You
But one part that's funny in this scene in particular, the husband, I forget exactly what he says. He says something like, "Oh, do you know about Greg Stilson? Do you know what he stands for?" And Johnny's like, "Well, I hope I do." And it like there's a big billboard of his face right outside of his house. And I thought that was funny because it reminds me of just like how social media is nowadays. Like, you don't know everybody and what they all stand for, but you see their face fucking everywhere. Like on Twitter, you're just scrolling and it's always like news about Donald Trump.
yeah, yeah. Or the asshole from Florida,
Yep,
the governor.
DeSantis.
Yeah, yeah, DeSantis. Yeah. Uh, it's like 2023, and I can already imagine like how 2024 is just going to suck with all the advertisements
Uh-huh.
and all that. It's just going to
Yep.
absolutely suck.
It's gonna be awful.
So then they leave, and he kind of needs a moment to collect himself.
Hmm.
And here
Yeah.
comes the little fucking kid. Why are you crying, Johnny?
Yeah.
Back off.
Yeah, and that was like very like almost overacted, I feel like, but maybe that's just Christopher Walken, but he was just like leaning dramatically on the door frame and he's like, "Oh, don't talk to me right now."
Very melodramatic,
Yeah.
100%. But he even like hugs the kid,
Right.
and when he hugs him, he has a vision of
Hmm.
him drowning
Yeah.
in a hockey uniform.
Right.
And so then he goes to the house, and he finds out that the father has set up this league for the kid to play hockey, and he's got all his friends there and all that sort of stuff. They're going to be playing on this lake behind the house, and Johnny is very adamant that he cancels it. He call off the event, and the dad's like, "Call it off? What do you mean? No, we're definitely going to do this."
Hmm.
Then, do you remember what Johnny does here?
He like breaks the vase with his cane or something.
Yeah, and he says the ice is gonna break in
Yeah. Yeah.
his best his best Christopher Walken impersonation. He
Right.
says that, the ice is gonna break, and then the dad's like, okay, fine, we'll cancel it, and so
Hmm.
he ends up leaving, and then the dad later on, the dad's in the goes to see the son. He's like, are you ready to go? Kid's like, what do you mean? You said we're not gonna do it. He's like, no, that was just to get him out of the house. We're gonna go.
Just set it to get him out of the house. Yeah. That was funny. It's always like things like that. It really plays into just like anxiety in general and just like your intrusive thoughts like, "Oh, if I go uh skating on this hockey rink outside, then the ice is going to break and I'm going to drown." Like all those intrusive thoughts that could happen. In this case, it like actually is going to happen. It's funny.
Yeah, and so the kid, I forget his name. I can't think of his name right now, but
Chris, I
uh,
think.
is Chris? Okay, thank
Mhm.
you. So Chris basically says no, he's not going to go, but so the dad continues the event without him. Um, the next day, Johnny walks up to the newspaper and reads it, that two people drowned in an accident at that hockey practice,
Yeah.
and he calls to make sure that it wasn't Chris, and Chris picks up. The
Mhm.
dad is like in the chair, like not
Like in
moving,
shock.
in
Yeah.
shock, with because it's his fault.
Yeah, it is 100%.
Because even Johnny even says, like, when he's telling him to cancel it, he's like, don't you know who I am?
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
says, yeah, I am. I know who you are, but I'm getting you for your tutoring abilities, not your psychic abilities. But it's like
Right.
he has predicted the fire with the little girl. He predicted, well, he found out who the killer was,
Yeah.
or the Castle Rock killer. So, and this is your son, and you're not taking it seriously.
Yeah, like
And
even
then,
if you don't believe in like psychic stuff, if someone is like adamant that this bad thing is going to happen to your child, I feel like you would listen to them. Even if you don't believe in that stuff, you're like, "Oh, okay, maybe let's just do something else today."
well, yeah, because I would take it as a threat, maybe not necessarily
Yeah,
from Johnny,
yeah.
but it's a threat against the, and I would treat it that way. And
Hmm.
that would be easier because I understand being a, not believing because I don't believe either. So I don't know in that situation what I would do, but like he has uh, experience, like things have happened, so.
Yeah, yeah.
So anyway, so um, kid's okay. And then we find out that Stilson's having the rally across from Johnny's house, and he sees Sarah and goes decides to try to talk to her. Then there's this crowd as Stilson arrives, and he's shaking hands, kissing babies, that sort of thing. And
Hmm.
this is when he does shake Johnny's hand here,
Yeah.
and he sees the vision. Um, he sees a vision. Do you remember what the vision was?
Yeah. So Greg Stilson is shaking everybody's hands and like not really paying attention to whose hand he's shaking at this point. So then Johnny's able to kind of sneak in through the crowd and shake his hand at that point. And he gets the vision of Greg Stilson as president in this like very dark, ominous room that almost looks like a cabin lounge almost. It gave me like
Yeah,
weird, almost like liminal space vibes.
I think it
Um,
might be like Camp David, which is where the president
uh
camps.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And he's with like this army general or whatever with like this like futuristic looking box that you can infer is like the nuclear launch button basically. And so Greg has says that he has this vision, this is my destiny, and he's like gonna launch a nuke on the USSR. So basically he blackmails this general to press the button with him. Um and like sends a preemptive nuclear strike against the USSR, even though like some other diplomats were like, we have a diplomatic solution to this conflict, but Greg is like, no, I've already pressed the button. It's too late.
Yeah, and so he presses the button and then like uh shakes Simon's hand. No, what is his paid gorilla's name? Whatever.
Sunny.
Sonny, yeah, he shakes his hand like he just did something like monumentous, like in a great way. Then he does
Yeah,
walk out, and those generals are like, "We have a diplomatic solution," like you said, and he's like, "Not too late, I already did it."
too late.
It's like that's the end of the world because
Yeah,
nuclear proliferation means that when you launch a nuclear strike, I will be launching a nuclear strike, and then the people that I'm allied with will be not launching a nuclear strike. It's over. The world is over.
yeah, like it's done. That's it.
Yeah. And so there was actually a part that was in the script that wasn't shot. That was in a different version where Stilson actually goes through with the threat of chopping off his hand, chopping off the general's hand and putting it on the scanner.
Oh,
And that would have been, I thought that we could
oh
have gotten
man,
some
I
more there,
that's
right?
another thing. I would have wanted to see that. Like that would have
Yeah,
been cool.
yeah. But obviously it didn't make it into the final script.
Yeah.
So that's the end of the vision. Later on, he's called the doctor back to his house, and he asks the doctor if he could go back in time to kill Hitler. Sorry, if he could go back in time to kill Hitler, would he?
Yeah.
Uh, and he says,
Yeah, I really liked what the way that the doctor kind of put it in this scene because he's like, I'm a doctor. I took an oath to protect people, to help people. Of course, I'm gonna fucking kill Hitler. Like,
"Yeah,"
I really liked the way that they set that up.
because you think he's going to be like, I took this oath. I can't hurt it. I can't hurt people.
Yeah,
But he switches it because like he's going to hurt millions and millions of
yeah,
people. So obviously
yeah.
the greater good is killing him. So
Right.
which can get kind of dicey in some situations, but when it's Hitler, fuck yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Hitler's a pretty universal. Like, yeah, we would kill him for sure.
Well, yeah, you would think so. You would think
Yeah,
so that you would
yeah,
think that people would think that Nazis are bad, but
yeah.
unfortunately,
Unfortunately.
yeah. Um, so we're taking a stance here at My Horror Confessional. Fuck Nazis. That's right.
Yeah, fuck Nazis, 100%.
So then this is where he finds out that he can see and also change the future because he
Yeah,
changed the future with Chris.
right.
So he decides to do it, and I put here because I was being clever. Johnny got his gun, which is the title of a Dalton Trumbull book that I love so much. So he gets his rifle, and he writes a farewell letter to Sarah. And
Yeah.
in it, he says, "The power is a gift, not a curse." And he just says it wasn't in the cards for us. And that was
Hmm.
sad.
That is very sad. Yeah. I do like sort of the way that that part pans out though. Like if, if I was to like get a vision like, oh, this person's gonna cause the end of the world, uh I like writing a letter to someone you love, like being like, I know that this is gonna cost me my life, but I need to do it for the betterment of humanity. I think it was very poetic and nice. I liked it.
Yeah, he's essentially he's sacrificing himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then Johnny, the night before Stilson is going to be having a campaign rally, breaks into the hall where that campaign rally is to be held, and sleeps up in the balcony.
Yeah.
Um, then next day, everybody starts arriving, and then we see Sarah is there with Denny, and as Stilson is like saying hi to everybody and all that, he sees Sarah and tells her to come on stage with him and bring Denny, because obviously a photo opportunity with him, right?
Right. Yeah. I thought that
Uh
that was kind of weird. Like, why single out Sarah and bring her out? Is it just because she had the baby and he just wanted a picture with the baby? Or
I mean, obviously, yeah, I think what happens next needed to happen, like to show what
yeah.
kind of a horrible person he is. So, but yeah, I think making her a campaign worker for him, so he would most likely, there's more of a chance of him being familiar with her. And so, because he
That's
did see
true.
like, oh, is that your baby? And so it
Yeah,
felt more like a coworker seeing another coworker's baby for the first time.
that's true. Yeah.
So then so he invites her onto the to stage. Then he's talking for a bit, and then suddenly Johnny jumps up and is about to shoot him. Sarah sees Johnny and yells out his name, which distracts him,
Hmm.
and he fires and he misses, but um, the the gorilla, I think,
Greg,
just
yeah.
yeah.
And
No,
Greg like
the
grabs the baby and uses him as a shield. It was like, oh my God. But
yeah,
like also I can see Donald Trump doing something like that.
100%, 100%, yeah. And then so yeah, Greg Stilson grabs Denny to protect himself, and then Sonny shoots and kills Johnny. Well, shoots him twice, once in the hand and once in the
Yeah.
gut, sort of thing. And Johnny tumbles over and falls off the balcony. Then Stilson runs over and grabs him and demands, like, "Who sent you?" And then Johnny has another vision of Stilson sitting by himself in like a dark room, and there's a gun on a magazine. He picks up the gun, and we see it's a Newsweek cover with Stilson on it. It says "No future for Stilson," with the image of him using Denny as a
Yeah.
freaking baby shield.
Like that's so morbid. Like, let me use this baby as a shield. Like, whose instinct is that?
Yeah. And then we hear the gunfire, and then blood splatters all over the magazine, and it's over.
Yeah.
And then Sarah comes over, or so Stilson leaves. He wants to get stop the photographer.
Yeah.
And even Sonny was really disgusted with him at that time. He was just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
"Stop that guy!" And he's like, "I didn't see any guy," or something like that. He was like really disgusted with him.
Right.
So Sarah comes over, hugs him, and he dies in his arms.
Hmm.
And before she dies, she says, "I love you."
Yeah.
Uh, and then that's the end of the movie. But before we start talking about that, I just want the one last thing is, when she's crying and hugging Johnny, we hear her stop crying for a few seconds to tell Johnny that she loves him,
Hmm.
but we can't see her mouth because it's obscured. So she didn't actually say that. It wasn't in the script. Her voice was dubbed in later in order to have some closure for Johnny.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
So imagine that scene where she doesn't say, "I love you." I
Yeah,
think
no.
it's
That
so much more tragic.
it's very sad. Yeah, that's very sad. No, I like that they added that in. I think it works. It makes sense for their
Yeah.
characters.
And so that's the end of the Dead Zone. So we're gonna rate it in a bit, but overall, what did you think about the Dead Zone?
I liked it. I had a good time watching it, but I think I got my hopes up too much for it because I saw, oh, Stephen King, love him. David Cronenberg, love him. I wanted, I've said this a million times, but I wanted more. I wanted to develop the Castle Rock killer sequence. I wanted body horror that David Cronenberg is known for. I wanted more weirdness. It feels very mild. Like obviously I had a good time watching it. I liked it, but it it is two like superpowers of horror, but I it feels very milk toast to me.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with you. I was kind of disappointed in it when you have the names that you have. I think like Christopher Walken did his thing. I don't think it
Yeah,
was anything in the acting
yeah,
or the directing. If it
right.
was directed by somebody else, I'd be fine with it. When you have somebody the caliber of Cronenberg connected with Stephen King, it's just like you're expecting a lot, like you're saying, and
Yeah,
it doesn't deliver on its potential. It's kind of like we're grading it feels a bit unfairly. I'm
yeah,
grading it. I don't know about you, but I'm grading it on its potential, what it could have been, as opposed to what
yeah.
it is.
No,
And
same.
if this was anybody else, if this was a director that I didn't know, I would be grading it on what it could have been. I would have been grading
Right.
on just that director.
Yeah, yeah. Like if it wasn't David Cronenberg, I'd be like, "Oh, I like this movie. This was a good one. I enjoyed it. I had a good time." But because it's David Cronenberg directing it, I'm like, this could have been so amazing.
Yeah.
And it could have been so goopy and weird, but it didn't follow through.
I mean, he's a victim of his own success, right? Like he has us
Right.
expecting this, right? It's not
Yeah, yeah.
you did this.
Your fault.
Yeah. All right, so then we can go ahead and go into ratings. First, before do that, was there anything about the Dead Zone? Anything else that you wanted to say?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered everything.
Okay, cool. So then we can go into ratings. So we do rate movies out of 5 upside down crosses here.
Mhm.
So out of 5 upside down crosses, what would you give the Dead Zone?
I'm gonna be a little harsh. I'm gonna say 2 out of 5 upside down crosses.
Okay,
I
that is
would give it,
harsh.
yeah, I like, I'm usually not super harsh because like I had a good time watching it, but it could have been so cool and like it could have been more weird. I wanted it to be weird.
So that leads me to think I want to know what other movies you would give 2 stars because I need a comparison. But maybe we
Yeah.
could save that for the post show, the Sunday School Sessions, which is the Patreon exclusive show. If
Yeah.
anybody wants to support the show, patreon.com/slash my horror confessional. You get the episodes early and you get post show uh, Sunday School Sessions that I have with all of my guests. So maybe we could talk about that after that. So,
Yeah.
all right. So you gave it 2 upside down crosses. All
Yes.
right. For me, I think I am at 3 upside down crosses. I think this very well could have been a 4.5 movie if Cronenberg were allowed to shine a bit more.
Yeah.
Shining, get it? But more of his stuff were allowed to shine to come through. And I get it, you're adapting something from the novel, but
Right.
they made so many changes to the novel, and then King has had it done to him before with like literally The Shining, where
Yeah.
the book was so different from the movie, and so you could have done something different, and but you didn't. So that and he might have been hamstrung by the studio and Dino De
That's
Laurentiis and
very
such
true.
things. So
Yeah.
so
Like
I'm not necessarily blaming him.
yeah, I can very easily see the studio just being like, no, we can't make this super weird. We can't make this like The Fly, or I know The Fly hadn't come out yet, or we can't make it like Videodrome. Uh, but yeah, I think it's the expectation got in my head, like, oh, this is a David Cronenberg movie. So I had this expectation in my mind that was like, oh, it's gonna be like this sort of weird body horror vibe. And then when it wasn't that, I was like, oh, that sucks.
Yeah. So for me, I give it 3 upside down crosses. It could have been more, but it just didn't reach its potential. So okay, Ellie. So the next thing we do here is I ask for a suggestion from you, and I will give you a suggestion of a movie in a similar vein to The Dead Zone. So for me, I think I'm going to recommend to you The Fury from 1978,
Mm.
directed by Brian De Palma and starring Kirk Douglas, John Cassavetes, and Carrie Snodgrass. And real quick, the one sentence synopsis: a former CIA agent uses the talents of a young psychic to help retrieve his telekinetic son from terrorists who want to use his mental powers for evil.
Mm.
So
That
it's
sounds cool.
very, yeah, I think it's got the telekinetic thing. I think you'll enjoy it. And of course, Brian De Palma is amazing.
Love him.
One of
Yeah.
those early De Palmas. So that's my
Nice.
recommendation to you. Do you have a recommendation for me?
I do, yeah. I this is sort of a classic that I'm sure many people have seen, but I'm gonna recommend Scanners, which is another
Nice.
Cronenberg film. Um, Scanners is like basically what I wanted out of the Dead Zone. I feel like it has the psychic abilities, the telekinetic, telepathic powers, but it has that body horror element, and it
Mhm.
has like more weirdness to the plot that's just like very strange and a little bit hard to follow at times, but after like a couple of watches, you're like, oh wow, this is really cool. It's what I wanted out of the Dead Zone, I think. So I'll recommend Scanners.
100% I agree. Okay. Scanners is a great movie. So wanted to thank you, Ellie, for coming on the show. Ellie and I are going to,
Yeah.
like I said, continue our conversation on the Sunday school sessions, which is the Patreon exclusive show. But for now, we're going to go ahead and say goodbye. Oh, Ellie, if you could please do me a favor and let everybody know how they can follow you, how they can support you, how they can buy your book, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Ellie M. Roy, and on Blue Sky as well if we're using that, EM Roy there, just in case Twitter/X dies in the near future. Um, and yeah, you can pre-order, I guess by the time maybe this comes out, it'll be closer to October 10th when my book comes out, which is Let the Woods Keep Our Bodies from Ghoulish. You can either pre-order it or order it there directly from Max if you just Google "Let the Woods Keep Our Bodies" or just look on Ghoulish's website. It'll pop up there.
Yeah, and this will be dropping Friday.
Oh, cool.
Uh, and so it'll be out definitely as a pre-order. And I
Yeah.
happen to I was at Ghoulish bookstore yesterday,
Mhm.
and I've seen the book and it looks
Yeah.
awesome. And I was a subscriber for the Ghoulish Kickstarter this year. And so I got the book as well, but I just got it yesterday. It looks great. I'm very excited
Nice.
to start reading it. So
Yeah.
all right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for listening. Go pre-order that book. I think you're going to enjoy it a lot. We will talk to you next week, and for Patreons, we'll talk to you on Sunday school sessions. Thank you very much.